when you hear people talk about gun control in the way that they do, you have to understand that it seems to have nothing to do with actually preventing bad things from happening and everything to do with castigating their political opposition as evil. So, for example, yesterday, again, it's the same routine over and over. We're not even going to specify what policy we want, but we're just going to tell you there's a policy that solves all of this. And if you oppose us, it's because you oppose that policy and because you're either corrupt and in the pay of the gun lobby or something. By the way, when Joe Biden talks about the gun lobby, understand the so-called gun lobby in the United States has never been as weak as it is currently in the United States. And the NRA used to be an extraordinarily powerful political force in the United States. It is not anymore. But the NRA has been suffering like hit after hit because of internal corruption and serious management problems in the NRA. There are some other gun groups out there, but they don't have anything like serious political sway. The reality is that the gun lobby in the United States is gun owners in the United States, which is 100 million people in the United States. People who believe in the Second Amendment. In other words, it's a popular movement in the United States for people who are law-abiding to be able to own guns. And nobody who's law-abiding wants somebody who's not law-abiding to own guns. I know there's this weird idea out there that somehow if you're a gun owner or you're pro-gun ownership, that somehow this means you want bad people to have guns. No. I'm just assuming that bad people will find a way to get guns, and I'd like to have one to protect myself. And confiscating my gun isn't going to make school children any safer in any logical way at all. It makes school kids less safe because I'm a person on hand who can presumably grab my gun and try and go do something about it. You know, if there were a way of magically, there's no one on earth who, if there were a way of snapping your fingers and magically every bad person couldn't have a gun, wouldn't snap their fingers. That policy does not exist. And yet the suggestion of the left is that it does exist. Somehow, magically. So, for example, Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, is sort of odd because yesterday she actually spoke before the president of the United States on this, which is sort of a breach of protocol. Here is Vice President Harris, who responded immediately by, again, suggesting that we just have to have the quote-unquote courage to take action. And this is the common line, is that it's just a question of willpower. We have the solutions. It's just well, no, you're going to have to name the solutions, and then we're going to have to discuss them. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about it's the willpower. Elect us to do some unspecified thing because we are the good people, and people who oppose us are morally unvirtuous. Here is Kamala Harris.
As a nation, we have to have the courage to take action and understand the nexus between what makes for reasonable and sensible public policy to ensure something like this never happens again.
Okay, does she suggest what that public policy would look like? Or what's in it? What would stop all this? Of course she doesn't. She just says it's out there, and we all know what it is. Really? Then articulate it. Just articulate it. Then we can have an open conversation about what that policy looks like. Are we talking about stronger ERPOs? How are those enforced? Are we talking about different background checks? How is that made different? What are we talking about here? Because you never hear them actually specify the hard policy, because the minute that they do, it becomes absolutely clear it wouldn't stop a shooting like this. And you get the same thing from Barack Obama, who is fond of drawing this stark moral contrast between himself on the side of he was the great light bringer, of course, and all of his political opponents who are on the side of darkness and evil for not simply acquiescing to all of his political prescriptions. Here's Barack Obama's statement yesterday, quote, "Across the country, parents are putting their children to bed, reading stories, singing lullabies, and in the back of their minds, they're worried about what might happen tomorrow after they drop their kids off at school or take them to a grocery store or any other public space. Michelle and I grieve with the families in Uvalde who are experiencing pain no one should have to bear. We're also angry for them. Nearly 10 years after Sandy Hook and 10 days after Buffalo, our country is paralyzed, not by fear, but by a gun lobby and a political party that have shown no willingness to act in any way that might help prevent these tragedies." Right? It's their unwillingness. They're evil. Make no mistake. What he is saying is that if you oppose his political prescriptions, which go unnamed in this thread, is because you are an evil human being. You're a bad human being. You're in league with shooters. You're somebody who wants dead kids if you don't agree with Barack Obama. He says, it's long past time for action, any kind of action. And it's another tragedy, and a quieter but no less tragic one, for families to wait another day. May God bless the memory of the victims and, in the words of Scripture, heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds. So I have a question. This one phrase is so telling. It's long past time for action, any kind of action. That is not a recipe for public policy. That is an emotional appeal to bad public policy. You can't make public policy on any issue like this. It's past time for action. Any kind of action? Like if I run into a brick wall, was that an action? Like what exactly is the action that you're proposing? Is the action that you're proposing cutting greenhouse gas emissions? Like what? It's time for any kind of action? Presumably not, because I can propose you 5 different types of action that Democrats have rejected. because they don't think that either it will work or that it is worth the cost or whatever it is. It's all an attempt at moral suasion aimed directly at people who disagree with them on their policy prescriptions by calling them murderers. Chris Murphy did the same routine from the floor of the Senate yesterday. He got up, and of course, he got all of the plaudits of the media for doing this. Here we go.
Find a path forward here. Work with us to find a way to pass laws that make this less likely. It will not solve the problem of American violence by itself, but by doing something, we at least stop sending this quiet message of endorsement to these killers whose brains are breaking, who see the highest levels of government doing nothing.
That's okay. This is crazy. So it's a quiet level of endorsement to not pass bad public policy. You think that shooters are sitting around going, well, if they had passed that gun control bill, that really would have been a signal that they're taking this thing seriously. Guess I won't kill those kids. Is that's really what Chris Murphy, this dolt, is out there saying? No, he's not saying that. He doesn't really believe that mass shooters sit around and wonder at the internal machinations of Senate committees on gun control. He knows that's not the case. What he's really saying is, if you don't do what I want you to do, it's because you're a bad person. And of course, you have to go to the media and Hollywood to just make this absolutely clear. So every headline at the New York Times and Washington Post today is about gun control. So for example, McConnell says he is, quote, horrified and heartbroken. This is the Washington Post. No, sorry, this is the New York Times. Quote, McConnell says he is horrified and heartbroken, but gives no indication he is dropping his opposition to new gun laws. Well, hold up a second. Which gun law is being proposed? Again, the idea here is that if you do not acquiesce to whatever we say, it doesn't matter what X is. We have to do, they're literally saying this. It doesn't matter what this empty vessel we're going to say is action is. You have to go along with us, or you're providing quiet impetus to shooters. That's an amazing statement. The Washington Post, from Sandy Hook to Buffalo and Uvalde, 10 years of failure on gun control. Again, why is it? Back to our original question. Why is it that when it's in Buffalo, New York, the issue is white supremacy, but not gun control? When it happens in the New York subway system, it's not gun control and it's not white supremacy, so I guess it just disappears. When it happens in California and it's not a white supremacist attack, then we don't talk gun control because California gets an A rating from Brady Center for gun control. When it happens in Texas and it's not a white supremacist, we have to talk about Sandy Hook, Buffalo, Uvalde, then it's about gun control. And it's about failure on gun control. Okay, and again, the not quiet implication is you're bad. You're evil. So Rob Reiner just says it straight up. Rob Reiner, the director and actor, he tweeted out, the blood of every child that dies of gun violence in this country is on the hands of the Republican Party. The blood of all those kids is on the hands of the Republican Party, which is quite amazing since there are a bunch of children who are dying in Chicago pretty much every weekend in mass shootings. And Rob Reiner does not seem to care because Chicago is completely Democrat run. But again, I'm not suggesting that Lori Lightfoot is in favor of children getting shot. I don't think she's in favor of children getting shot. I think she has bad public policy ideas, but I would never suggest that she's in favor of kids being murdered. Fred Gutenberg, who, you have to give Fred Gutenberg at least some level of flexibility here, considering that he actually lost his daughter in a mass shooting. He's now become a spokesperson for gun control. His daughter was murdered at Parkland. But here he was basically saying that anyone who disagrees with him, we don't love our kids. If you're a Republican, you don't love your kids, which is, I know parents who also lost kids at Parkland and who oppose Fred Gutenberg's specific prescriptions. Did they not love their kids who were murdered at Parkland? Here's Fred Gutenberg.
I heard you with Senator Murphy earlier. He has been heroic. He needs one of these Republicans. This can't be Democrats solving this. These Republicans need to actually love their children as well. And they need to walk into his office and they need to grab him by the arms and say, we're with you.
Republicans apparently, they don't love their kids. Meanwhile, you have Steve Kerr, who's been allowed to speak out about public policy again. So Steve Kerr, of course, was completely silent when it came to China and genocide against Uyghurs. Well, whenever there is a gun control issue, he jumps to it. We'll also point out that Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, at the height of riots in Oakland, suggested that police officers ought to be removed from Oakland schools. And this is something that he actually said in 2020. But he went viral for a rant that he delivered just before a playoff basketball game last night. And he went off. And again, this is not a call for actual measures that would prevent shootings like this. This is an emotional appeal suggesting that everyone who is not on his side of the political aisle is a bad person.
Now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like.
That's what it looks like. It looks like they're on his. So first of all, if you follow his logic through to his endpoint, he's saying that elected officials, their desire for power is leading them to allow school children to die. So first of all, where does he think elected officials get their power? Typically, elected officials get their power from being elected. This is why they're called elected officials. So what he's really saying is that a vast majority of Americans don't support his policies, but he knows the solutions, and so we should just implement those solutions. Well, I'm all ears. I'm all ears. What are your solutions? If you want to say full-scale gun confiscation, say it out loud. Let's hear it. Say it out loud. Just do it. They won't do it because if they do it, then they know they will lose politically. Because they know that the American people are not going to go for that. And again, the data don't back up the idea that full-scale gun confiscation or gun buybacks or anything like has been suggested in Australia is likely to be effective. AOC does the same routine. It's always the same routine. The idea is that we are going to stand on graves and then we are going to proclaim that you are in favor of this person being murdered unless you support what we are doing right here. So the irrepressibly stupid Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she tweeted, "There is no such thing as being pro-life. While supporting laws that let children be shot in their schools, elders in grocery stores, worshipers in their houses of faith, survivors by abusers, or anyone in a crowded place. It's an idolatry of violence and it must end." I have a question. Supporting laws that let children be shot, I was unaware that murder became legal in the United States. When did that happen? Laws that let people be shot? Explain. She can't explain. And by the way, you're owning yourself when you suggest that you can't be pro-life and support this sort of stuff. So you're using this stuff to defend abortion? That's your move? Your move is to defend abortion on the basis of this? Strange political move. We're in a battle for the culture and for our values. Like and subscribe to help keep our videos on the front line of the fight and top of your feed.